Right. So today there was an idea to finish with those major secret operations of consciousness and make a link between all the different structures of consciousness. So we moved from Vedic to Vedantic, Upanishadic, which was these faculties, and then to Sankhya. Sankhya we already examined. But today I wanted to finish something very special in my view, because we take for granted the faculties and we think that they are what they are. So we know that the mind, the seeing, hearing are there, but what are they? And we really can't answer this question. What are these faculties? What is seeing? What is hearing? What is thinking? So we need to deconstruct them, so to say, to come to the very core of the operation of consciousness, secret operation, which would allow us to understand better what we are talking about. So once we understand the functionality of these faculties, how they function, what they really do, what seeing does, what hearing does, what thinking does, feeling does, how it operates, and how it is different, why we call this feeling and that's seeing and not the same thing, sensing everything. Why don't we call all of it sensing, simply to say, I'm sensing the sun, I'm sensing the music, I'm sensing the, don't know, the concept, I'm sensing the word. So why don't we call it simply sensing everything? But we found these names, seeing, hearing, speaking, thinking, feeling, and being in the body, and these are functionally different. And we want to look into that, how they are different and what they really do to be called those faculties. What mind does, what seeing does, and so on. We already did a little bit of it. Yes, last time we spoke quite extensively on this, but now I want to finish the whole presentation. So we looked into these into the scheme. So we see that if the senses or the faculties are turned without, we call them senses. We call them as indriyas. Indriyas are those senses of Sankhya, turned outside and perceive the objects outside and bring the information from the objects, outer objects within, and mind selects them and makes sense of them. And these we call senses. Sri Aurobindo says that indriyas are infinite and they pervade the whole universe. He means that these indriyas are actually not indriyas in terms of Sankhya, in terms of turned outside, but the indriyas which are also within. So that what we call faculties here. We distinguish the senses, indriyas turned without, in themselves we call them faculties, and when they are turned within and they receive the inner light of our self, of our soul, then those faculties which operate on that innermost level, we call in our system secret operations. Sri Aurobindo calls them in that way. So first they are secret operations, then they are manifested in themselves as manifested faculties of consciousness, and finally they perceive the outer being. So they can perceive inner and outer being. We are speaking in a schematic way, just to understand what we are dealing with, yes? Of course, this is the same faculty on each of the levels. And sometimes even I hear this suggestion all the time from Radha and others, that we speak about these faculties in different ways, like seeing, hearing, speaking, thinking is something which we operate with. But when we speak about subtle faculties, subtle body, then we also have seeing, hearing, speaking, thinking. So let us speak about Sukshma Sharira and the subtle faculties. Yes? But when we speak about subtle faculties in themselves, how they operate, then we speak about the faculties. In my view, truly speaking, they are the same faculties on all these levels, from the highest to the lowest. They do not change their functionality. They remain the same, only they deal with different instruments and different objects, yeah, of sense, or the image of things. So in the inner level, they deal with other objects of sense, in the innermost with the other object of sense, but they operate in the same way. And so we have to figure out what are these, yeah, today. So in the Upanishads, these six, we spoke about them extensively. They are defined as the major faculties of consciousness. So today I am moving to this adhyatmic level. There were many attempts in Indian tradition and other traditions to build up the holistic vision of knowledge, synthesis of knowledge, of all the elements in one way. I brought this different types of integrality. We will look into it at the end. But here we will speak about these two major adhyatmic levels of operation of consciousness. And these are the faculties as secret operations within the self, with the higher or the innermost self, and the verities of the psychic being. They are quite different in their application, in their functionality. We can call the faculties as the technologies of consciousness, if you will. Something how we see, how we hear, how the consciousness functions, yes, how Purusha functions through its faculties. And the verities of the psychic being, these 12 qualities, are very different. They are different in the very substance, as it were. So if you take sincerity and humility and gratitude, they are not kind of, they are not seeing, hearing, speaking, thinking. Yeah? They are not functionality of consciousness. They are the qualities or the truths or the powers, let us say, which bring the delight into action. They bring that bliss, yeah? That particular quality of enjoyment. Somewhere Sri Aurobindo says if only once the person would experience one of these qualities, he calls them eternal dharmas. Yeah? He would never be able to get away from them. He would always want to come back to the experience of the same quality. Once we experience to be truthful, we enjoy it so tremendously that we want to be always truthful. And not because we want to be truthful by some kind of, definition of dogmatic definition, be true, but because it is a pure delight to be truthful, or to be grateful. Yes, when you're grateful, you feel that delight which nobody can feel, so you want again that delight, so you want to be grateful. And so on. Or courageous. Yeah, once you experience true courage, you can't really get rid of it. You want to be courageous again and again, and you will be looking for the opportunity to be courageous. So these are the very different in their constitution or in their substance, in their very yes, in their very nature, very different movements of consciousness, and they constitute the holistic vision of the development. By the way, about the varieties, we know very little from Indian tradition. It's quite interesting. Uh, Indian tradition is more spiritualistic. We see these varieties and qualities starting from Ramayana onwards. If you read about Rama, who he was, you will read about his qualities, not his description of his functionalities. Though he was powerful, he was a very great warrior and so on, but his qualities, inner qualities of kindness, great gratitude, sincerity, truthfulness, were of the highest standards. And in that sense, we recognize Rama as charged with the psychic qualities. And that's why we are attracted to this literature. Notice when we read books or we look at, watch some movies, we are always looking for those qualities to emerge. We need mm, the story to be, how to say, built in such a way that these qualities will emerge. So there will be a crisis, and in that crisis, that particular quality will emerge. Or courage or truthfulness suddenly, when it is very difficult to be true. And we admire it. It's exactly the gist we are looking for that very moment in the whole movie. The whole movie is going on, building up, and then suddenly this happens. And we receive the delight. This is the fulfillment of the story. So I'm just trying to kind of to distinguish between the two. So going a little bit astray. Now I'm coming back to these. Um, there is an interaction between the two, and very interesting interaction, very difficult to perceive immediately. So between the the self with faculties, the universal Purusha, with his seeing, hearing, speaking, thinking, and these qualities of Antaratman, which are kind of coming from the heart, from the depth of our heart. So one is the witness Purusha from above the head, other is presence within the heart. And they both have to interact. They both build this complex being, a human being, which is both Dvipad and Chatushpad in the terms of the Veda. Dvipad is this connection of the unborn self with the inborn self, and Chatushpad, all the levels of consciousness. So that means physical, vital, mental, and supramental. So 4 levels. And these 4 levels represent these functionalities or faculties of consciousness on each of these levels. Yes, on the level of the physical, we have all these. So they are all built our body. Yes, we have the annam, the body embodiment. We have breath, lungs, breathing, bringing oxygen and so on, life energy. We have seeing, hearing. We have speaking and thinking. Everything is built, and prana. Prana is also like feeling and emotions and sensations, all those electrical signals within the physical body. And the physical body. So we have on the physical level all of them functioning, on the vital level all of them functioning. There is a vital seeing, vital hearing, there is vital word in the state of dreams, there is the mental uh, functionality in the state of dreams. Yeah? You think, you speak, express yourself, you feel prana, it's pure prana level. And then on the level of the mind, we have all of them in the same way, but they operate differently because it's already mental level. So this kind of 6 faculties are present on each of the levels. up to supramental. Even in the supramental, the highest level of creation, we have this Shrotram as Shruti, as uh, inspirational knowledge, as Sri Aurobindo says, inspiration, Chakshus as Drishti, as revelation of the truth of light, Manas as supermind proper, yeah, supramental sense, word as Paravak in the Tantric tradition. These are all the faculties will be present from the highest to the lowest. And there are 4 levels of their presentation in brief. Yeah? But they are not touching upon this connection of the unborn self and inborn self, as it were. They cooperate with them. Their relations are dubious, not very clear, not even defined in a way. In the Veda, they speak about them, these two, as Dvipat and Chatushpat, kind of one after the other. Dvipade, Chatushpade. Be Shamyoch, be blissful to us, to Dvipat and Chatushpat. And that's it. They distinguish them. They do not put them together. So we follow that distinction for our studies, for better understanding of our nature, psychological nature. So there is technology of consciousness, and there are verities, qualities, enjoyments of the truth in application, in action, which are beaming from our innermost being, from the psychic being. So now, psychic hijacks all these faculties with its delight and starts illumining them, using them in its own way. So our speech, our word becomes sincere, truthful, yes, grateful, aspiring, courageous, good, with goodwill, generous, and so on. So it charges these faculties with its own qualities, and that is the interaction between the two, which we constitute basically. So our constitution is quite interesting in that regard. So now I am finishing with this introduction and going straight to Adhyatmic epistemology. So we will look into the secret operations of consciousness today and these verities of psychic being. We looked into it already a bit the last time, did we? Yes, we did. But it is always like a new topic every time. Okay, we will look into it again. There is no harm. I am looking into it every time, yeah, and always finding something new. There are secret operations in us, says Sri Aurobindo, in our subconscious and superconscious selves. So if you can imagine ourselves, so subconscious selves, physical, vital, mental, supramental, and transcendental, all these selves, it's one self on each of levels, on many levels, these selves, and there are secret operations which are manifesting those faculties, which precede this action. He refers to something in his text. But of these, we are not aware in our surface being, and therefore for us they do not exist. If we knew of them, our whole conscious functioning would be changed. So there is a reason why we don't know about them, because if we start seeing how consciousness operates, we will change our functionality. We will function differently. We have to be kept in ignorance for some reason, because we are working out something in this ignorance, some individual being, which otherwise could not be worked out. If we would be totally aware of our divine nature, we would not even do this work. We would jump out of this manifestation into that mukti state and would maybe refuse to even do this work. So we are kept in darkness and ignorance for the reason. Yeah? And now we will try to look into it and see how this consciousness functions. So these essential operations or secret operations are four. I already mentioned that there are more than four. Yeah, samjnana, jnana, vijnana, prajnana, drishtir, dhritir, matir, manisha, jyotik, smritik, sankalpa, krato, raso, kama, vasha. So 12 different qualities. Iti sarvanyevaitani prajnanasya nama dheyani bhavanti. This is the text from Aitareya, and it starts with samjnana, then ajnana, vijnana, prajnana, and the whole list of them. It means revelation, speed, will, creative will, even jutik, yes, speed, smritik, memory, sankalpa, intention. All those elements are part of the functionality of consciousness. So it's much more complex than we are looking now into it. But these four are major, and Sri Aurobindo deals with them. So we will deal with them today also. I read this before, and maybe not once, but I will read again, because this is very, the very beginning of conscious functioning. And Sri Aurobindo calls it the essential sense. He deals with it in the supramental sense. He will speak about samjnana in that chapter. Everything begins, everything means the creation, begins with the vibration or movement, the original kshobha or disturbance. Kshobha means vibration. If there is no movement of the conscious being, it can only know its own pure static existence. It's quite obvious. If being is not moving, then it knows itself as such. It's like a pure mirror in which being sees itself without any differentiation. There is no distinction. In the qualities, properties, it's just one something. Without vibration or movement of being in consciousness, notice, not consciousness in being moves in consciousness, there can be no act of knowledge and therefore sense. That's why we have being as first, consciousness is second, sat chit and not chit sat. Though they are one and the same, still the being, the self, is moving in its own consciousness, and by that movement this act of knowledge is being created and sense is being created. Consciousness, awareness. Awareness is created by the movement of being in consciousness. Without vibration or movement of being in force, there can be no object of sense. Because if being moves in force, it generates and creates the object of sense. So, in other words, the consciousness highlights one element of the being because it moved, and that highlighting it creates it as separate being. Yeah? Cuts it out, as it were, forms it in a particular separate form from the rest. And this is from root ma, to measure, measure out from the immeasurable, something to be measured out, to be formulated. From here, mother, the mother, Maya also, the creatrix, creatrix which measures out from him the immeasurable, all his properties and qualities into the beings, into the forms. So from there, the object of sense comes into being. So, and now he comes to this, what is this essential sense? Movement of conscious being as knowledge, conscious being moves as knowledge, becoming sensible of itself as movement of force. Interesting. Definition very difficult for the mind to handle. But if we try, we will see here the very depths of it. The movement of conscious being as knowledge becoming sensible of itself as movement of force. In other words, the knowledge separating itself from its own working to watch that and take it into itself again by feeling. This is the basis of universal samjnana. And this is true both for our internal and external operations. The faculties will work inwardly and outwardly in the same manner. And what is the manner? So it takes the object of sense as if it was made by some other force and perceives it anew, though that very consciousness which perceives this object has made it. It knows it already, but it looks at it as if it was not knowing it, and it discovers it anew. And that new discovery, why we can know anything, because we already know everything. Yeah? So only we have to arrive at it. And so this kind of trick of consciousness, so withdrawing the aspect of knowing from the aspect of creating and perceiving it anew as if it was not creating it, generates what we know as essential sense or consciousness by which we operate. Literally, samjnana is very well fitting into the definition of consciousness. Yes? To be aware totally. Con and sam are the same prefix. In Latin, con and com, yeah, and sam in Sanskrit. Community. Yeah, I was joking about community. Muni. When munis come together, then it's community. So everybody is liberated, everybody is muni coming together. But in this sam, and kon, yeah, you can see it in English very well. So consciousness, samjnana. Jnana is to know totally together. So this is the essential sense. He gives it more description in a very interesting manner. I become anger by a vibration of conscious force acting as nervous emotion, and I feel the anger that I have become by another movement of conscious force acting as light of knowledge. So how do I know in what state I am? Because this consciousness force is double. Yeah? One is generating something in the being, other knows that that generation is of that kind. Yeah? So I am conscious of my body because I have become the body. That the same force of conscious being which has made this form of itself, this presentation of its workings, knows it in that form, in that presentation. It's quite amazing because everything knows how to be itself, knows from within, from that very force which made it, conscious force. Everything, but everything, not only everybody, but also things. They know how to maintain their form, their functionality. This cup knows how to be a cup, because it's made of metal in a specific way. That consciousness fixes it to this particular functionality and it holds on to it. Everything, earth, space, stars, animals, you name it. Everything knows how to be itself and interact with others in a meaningful fashion. This is an amazing creation. So here we come to that very depth of that perception. I can know nothing except what I myself am. If I know others, it is because they are also myself, because myself has assumed these apparently alien presentations, as well as that which is nearest to my own mental center. All sensations, all actions of sense is thus the same in essence, whether external or internal, physical or psychical. This is the fundamental notion of knowledge by identity. There is no other way to know. You have to be that. So that's the movement of being in consciousness. If you want to know anything, you have to become it. You have to take this object of sense into itself in order to know it. Otherwise, how would I know this cup, what it does, or anything, if I am not related to it? I have to relate myself to it, or it to myself. Till now it's clear. In case you want to clarify something, you interrupt, okay? I welcome interruptions, they help. Otherwise I'm getting stuck to my own groove. Samjnana. Now we will come to all the definitions, 4 definitions. Is the contact of consciousness with an image of things by which there is a sensible possession of it in its substance. It will take time to really totally comprehend this. But if you can imagine, for me to know the cup, we already spoke about the cup or anything else, I have to fix it within my consciousness first. I have to feel the cup, yeah? The feel means physical. My hands are holding it. I feel it's cold, it's heavy, it's metal, it's hard, yeah? It's also a little rough. I feel all that. I make a sense of it within myself because I identify cup with myself. Sensible possession in its substance. The self of the cup and self of myself have a contact. If prajnana is another operation, can be described as outgoing of apprehensive consciousness, to possess its object in its conscious energy, to know it, as it were, as it is, samjnana can be described as inbringing movement of apprehensive consciousness which draws the object placed before it back to itself so as to possess it in its conscious substance. To feel it means to sense it as oneself. So there are 2 movements of apprehensive consciousness. Why apprehensive? Because I actually don't comprehend what it is. I just have a contact with it through myself and feeling. This is first. And for me to really make it, I have to make a movement of outgoing of my apprehensive cognition. I have to find this cup somewhere there. Oh, here it is. And then I fix it with myself. These are 2 movements of this apprehensive consciousness. I don't understand yet what it is, but I already made a contact of self with self. So prajnana is the consciousness which holds an image of things before it as an object with which it has to enter into relations and possess by apprehension and analytic and synthetic cognition. This object is still the object, it's not the subject. I hold it as an object in my consciousness, as different from me, as such. And I can analyze it as such. I can open, I can see, I can examine. Yes. At the same time, there is some jnana taking place that I identify it with myself, though I analyze it as such, not as myself. Yeah. Both are necessary for the operation of consciousness. And there are 2 comprehensive movements. These are apprehensive, dealing with the self. Comprehensive is one vijnana and other is ajnana. Vijnana is the original comprehensive consciousness which holds an image of things in its essence, totality, parts, and properties. It is the original, spontaneous, true, and complete view of it, which belongs properly to the supermind, and of which mind has only a shadow in the highest operations of the comprehensive intellect. Now, comprehension is understanding. Yeah? I have to understand the cup. So understanding is knowing all that image of things in its essence, mental, totality, you, there are so many aspects of it, parts and properties. There is a handle, there is a cave, there is a paint on the top, there is a cover on the top, or from the plastic, a plastic metal, all this connects. How to produce metal? Metal is from earth. There is this has to be, blacksmith had to work it out and then to form it into people hands knowledge. Everything comes together into this cup. So I reassemble the whole world in meaningful relations to achieve this event. Yeah, this image of things as cup. So it is in its essence, I know what it is, I understand what it is, it's comprehension. In its totality, parts, properties, all relations, what this cup can do to me, to others, and also in its original, it is in original and spontaneous, true and complete view of it. In a sense, how this idea of cup came into being in this form through the force, and what for it is here. So the meaning of it. So the meaning comes from comprehension. Apprehension doesn't give the meaning, it gives the contact with the self, whereas comprehension gives the meaning of how the self, this particular formulation of the being, is related to all other forms.
So, Vladimir, does that correspond to what we were saying last week about the difference between seeing and hearing?
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, this is why I'm all this saying, because I want to arrive at those faculties, hearing, seeing. I'm kind of working with this secret operations, because they will be dominant faculties, the dominant features of those faculties. And all of them, all four of them, are necessary for operation of consciousness. But when one is dominating, we call it hearing, or we call it seeing, or we call it thinking, or we call it speaking. And the last one, before we continue, it is the ajnana. Ajnana is the operation by which consciousness dwells on the image of things so as to govern and possess it in power. And unfortunately, he doesn't say more about this, but I will say from what I think he wants to say. These four, therefore, are the basis of all conscious action. These four, samjnana, ajnana, vijnana, prajnana. So ajnana is outgoing of comprehensive consciousness. He doesn't say this. But there are two comprehensive movements and two apprehensive. Of comprehensive consciousness of my will to deal with this object of sense in my view, how I want. To possess and govern it in power, my decision. I can open and drink, I can put it on the table, I can throw it into the wall, I can smash it, I can do whatever I will. And this self-expression, this logos power, the word, I express myself onto this object in my uh, own comprehensive view or understanding, how I understand these relations are to be established, or these meanings are to be revealed. So in that way, I express myself through power, a upon this object. So these
I'm a,
four, hmm?
I'm a little confused because last week we talked about the word as the first operation, the thing that the intention to manifest something, right?
Right.
Here it's like
Interestingly,
it's after the manifestation.
right. It's a very good question. By the way, Shibindo knows this and he tells us we will start with samjnana because we are already in the embodied state. And because we are in the embodied state, we begin with samjnana. But in the highest revelation from the top down, when nothing is manifested yet, then the word will be the first. But in the embodied state, we already have everything. Yeah? And so we will be operating in such a way that, well, I must say that they are all simultaneous operations. Only we spell them out in order to see the elements of this. So for me to take the cup and to drink from it, I need all of these operations in place. Yeah? I cannot reach out to something which I do not perceive as separate object of sense, prajnana. I have to perceive it as separate first. In analytic and synthetic cognition, okay, it's a cup, it's separate from me. Now I have to identify it with myself. So I bring it into myself to know it, so to say, as myself, to feel it. Knowledge by feeling what it is, yes? That this is part of myself, but it is not myself at the same time. And then at the same time, for me to grab it and to bring it in, I need the comprehensive vijnana, which would know that my hand would fit into this handle, that my muscles will be able to handle the cup and to bring it to my mouth, that my mouth is there in space and it may relate properly, and that it stands on this, that it can be disengaged from the table. All that I have to know by those properties and comprehensive relations. Yeah? And finally, I will have to make a will to really reach out with my hand, take it and bring it to my mouth. And that is ajnana. So these four, in this simple movement to take and to drink, all these four are already there, inbuilt. Now, when we come to the faculties, they are on this level of here in the middle, as it were, and operations are kind of being generated. Operations are generating these faculties, which will be then kind of independent to our own perception, as seeing is different from hearing, and mind is different from feeling, thinking, and speech. So this would be, let me kind of try to make sense of all of that what I said. So Sanjnana, if Sanjnana is inbringing of apprehensive consciousness of the image of things in order to feel it in its substance, so apprehensive knowing by becoming one with the object of sense, or by making it a part of oneself, so to say, identifying with it. It can be identified with the major faculty of subjective self-knowing, mind, manas, manas in Sankhya, that which operates by all the data which it takes and makes sense of it. It is the internal operation of my being, identifying with the outer sense. It is only by identifying with the image of things that one can actually know it. It is apprehensive because it appropriates the image of things into oneself. It brings it in, makes it its one's own substance, as it were. It makes an object of sense a part of the subjective self, and by that knows it. So before it was a separate being, now it is a part of the subjective self, and I can operate and know it. It is based on the essential sense operating through knowledge by identity. There is no other knowledge, as Shubindo describes. I know myself because I became this body. There is no other way to know the body, only to become it, by becoming knowing. So it could be that operation which we call the mind, because the mind, what we call mind, mental operation, is in its quintessential characteristic is the fixing consciousness upon the object of sense. It's concentration. Concentrating consciousness in order to know that onto which you concentrate, holding dharana, fixing consciousness, and by fixing, knowing it. But we think that the mind knows it, but mind is not knowing, it's only holding the image of things in identity with ourself. The knowledge comes from elsewhere. So we think that mind knows, but mind is the first operation which actually brings that, makes that contact of the self with the self and holds onto it. That power of consciousness to hold onto the object of sense in order to know it, to become it. So prajnana is apprehensive knowing by dwelling on the image of things bit by bit through analytical and synthetic cognition, recognizing it as such. So I'm looking at this cup. Oh, I see the handle. I see some word is written on it. Some top is plastic, metal. I see that there's some tea in it, and so on. I feel how heavy it is. So I analyze and look at it in parts and properties as such, not as a part of myself, not through myself. Recognizing it as such, it can be identified with the objective self-knowing, seeing. What seeing does this discrimination, discernment of the elements. The cup is different from the table, from the computer, from my hand. So this has to be seen. This has to be distinguished, cut out, as it were, cutting into pieces and recognizing them, distinguishing the elements in the image of things. It is apprehensive because it deals with these elements and knows them as such, as if objectively, not as oneself. We can look even at our body in that way. We can open and see our brain, or look at our eye objectively, at our heart objectively, even at our feelings and thoughts objectively. It operates on all the levels in the same way, prajnana, seeing. By the way, according to Aitareya, the whole manifestation of all the faculties was for the sake of prajnana, for the sake of objective viewing oneself. Because he wanted to see himself, as Mother says. He wanted to know himself objectively, in details. He never saw himself. Now he can see himself as a cup, as a computer, as this, as action, as the feeling, as the motion, as the faculty, as the verity, as sincerity. He can examine and see himself objectively in all those forms and activities and energies. It's amazing. He can learn about himself in all the details. Now, if you look at Vijnana and Ajnana, you will see that Ajnana is a comprehensive movement of consciousness expressed by the power of the self to rule or command over the image of things. The logos, the will, is expressed by the self and can be identified as the essential characteristic of the word, Vaj. At the beginning was the word, logos, and it was with God, and it was God. And so this vibration, this action of the comprehensive movement of self-expression of the self is the word. It is comprehensive because it expresses the subjective self. It doesn't express the objective being. It is my subjective self-expression. It is what I want, what I intend, it seems. And Vijnana. With this, we had a big dispute with Devashish Banerjee, and he even refused to publish my article because of Vijnana. Now we will come to it in an interesting way. Vijnana, a comprehensive, simultaneous knowing of all the parts in their relations and essence, supramental, subjective, and comprehensive knowledge, can be identified as an essential characteristic of Shruti, all-including and all-pervading presence of the spirit, hearing. It is comprehensive because it holds the image of things in relation to all other images in the subjective way, knowing their essential oneness and their characteristics and their relations and meaningful relations. And here we had a big dispute with Banerjee because he believed that Vijnana was seeing and not hearing. Actually, he's a seeing type. I wanted to tell him. And I'm a hearing type. And truly speaking, Vijnana is neither. Vijnana is all four. Yeah? All four are there, acting. But Vijnana as a difference, as a different from Ajnana, Sanjnana, and Prajnana, would deal with this oneness in meaningful relations between selves. So all these multiplicity of selves are related in a meaningful fashion. They have relations because everything is related to everything, it seems, in the supermind. And those relations are totally, absolutely 100% meaningful. Not 20% meaningful, as it is in this built world. Yeah? As Sri Aurobindo describes, the drop of honey relates to all other drops of honey and tastes all the other drops of honey, and all the other drops of honey taste this drop of honey. Can you imagine that kind of relation? So total 100% meaningful relations between all the selves. And how would you maintain the oneness, the multiplicity in oneness, actually, if supermind would not be there? Only through meaningful relations. They are all one in meaning, but they are separated in selves already. So what is the meaning, the appearance of meaning? Today I was actually writing about this. I have notes somewhere about this supramind. It was, and let me find it. Yes, Vijnana is a major function of hearing because the connectivity between different selves occurs through the meaning and not through the body, substance, form, self. Forms stay separate by seeing. They are separated, cut out, but they are connected through the meaning, deeper meaning. This cup is related to the table, can stand on the table, my hand can reach out and take it. All these meaningful relations can be activated in the self also, but they are there. The very form was created because of that it is possible for my hand to reach out and take the cup and drink from it. The very form of the cup, the very form of the hand, the very form of the table is meaningful because of these relations and not because of anything else. Otherwise, we don't need the table, we don't need the cup, we don't need the hand if they cannot interact. So connection or union is maintained through meaningful relations of these selves. The meaning of all is so overwhelming that it relates to all in oneness. this power to hold the oneness of all multiplicity is the supermind. The oneness of being Sat is maintained on the level of the supermind as oneness of comprehensive relations of all the selves with one another, forming thus one being. That's how we are one being, though we are different in seeing. The function of seeing plays a distinguishing role in maintaining the forms and shapes in meaningful relations. Oh, I didn't project it. Oh, I had to project it because the text is kind of... But nevertheless, you got it. So what I'm trying to say, that these secret operations manifest in their domination a particular function in consciousness, which we later know as mind, speech, hearing, seeing. Seeing means that we have to see objectively the form as it is. Hearing means we have to understand how this form relates to all other forms, meaning, and so on. That quintessential characteristic is standing out in that particular action of consciousness. Okay, here I stop. It's 11 o'clock. I took all the time instead of discussing with you. But if you have some questions or some observations, please, you're most welcome.
So, Vladimir, all these apprehensive and comprehensive happens simultaneously. It happens so quickly that we cannot really distinguish it as it is happening. We only see the result, right?
Yeah, mainly, yes, but
Mainly.
not always, not always. Sometimes, actually, comprehension always is a bit delayed in our manifested state. You see the cup,
Mhm.
and then it's a cup, yeah? There is a kind of a moment of which it takes to really comprehend what it is.
Mhm.
And especially when you see something which you don't recognize immediately, yeah? So for you to recognize that delay, you see already the form, but you do not know what it is. So you have to tune comprehension, and then that is what it is. But once you comprehend, all the world is reassembled around it in a new fashion, yeah? Around the cup. So this cup, actually, it's not just a cup. It is the focal point of the whole world in a specific fashion. So the whole world is reconfirming the cup. The gravity, the weight, the metals, the plastic, the hand, the purpose, the functionality, the ideas, the idea of holding the liquid within the cup cavity, this cavity, kubok, yeah? The same kupa, Sanskrit, yeah? Cave. All this, that there is hollow inside, tells us that the hollow inside, that it is not something different than a hollow inside. So that which is not hollow inside tells us that the cup is real also. Yeah? Though we think that doesn't tell us, but it tells us that negative support of this positive cup is also there. So the whole world is supporting that metal is not the wood. It is made in different way. So it has different functions, and so on. So the whole world has to be reassembled around any object, and that's the beauty of comprehension of the Vijnana. Yes? There we know what is what, and we know it immediately. Unfortunately, computer cannot know it. We spoke about this. Artificial intelligence can only apprehend, cannot comprehend easily. So because comprehension is a huge number of things, and also open to relations, because I can use it not in a proper way. I can use it as a hammer, because it's heavy enough in metal. And knowing that it is metal, I can really use it as a hammer to hammer the nail into, though it won't be proper usage. But in my view, as metal knowing something else, I may do that. It's amazing what is happening within consciousness, yes, and of course, computer cannot know it. You know? Once it knows that it is a cup to drink, you have to put into it many more data that it can be used differently, but it will be apprehensive data. It won't be his own figuring out. Yeah?
Because it doesn't have consciousness.
Yes.
Computer doesn't have consciousness, so it cannot figure out.
Shardalo said that there will be a time that even machines would have the consciousness. And this was an interesting statement because I believe that everything has consciousness, yeah? Even cup, but it has a consciousness of itself, as it were, how to be itself and not how to be something else. It doesn't actually express anything else unless I will take and express it as a hammer. Yeah? But even then, I think there's certain mechanisms like watches, they stop when the person dies or something, you know. This happens all the time. So there is a strange relation between the technology, outer technology, especially computers. Some people cannot handle computers. I have a friend who every time she starts computer, it malfunctions. There's always something wrong. There's no, she kind of cannot accept that machine.
No relation between herself and the computer. No relation has been established, I guess.
And she expects it to malfunction. It does all.
Yes, yes, yes.
It wants to satisfy her consciousness, so it malfunctions.
I
So the
used to
one,
sorry, go ahead, finish up.
the first thing that you said about, I have to read that again and understand for myself this, how in Prajnana the object, the knowledge is separated from the self. You know, we separate, the knowledge separates, and then we take it in again. I mean, that's the part that,
Oh, in Samjnana, yes, right.
yeah, in Samjnana. That is the part that I have to think about a little bit more, contemplate how that happens. I mean, the knowledge is within me, it separates. Why does it separate? What made it separate?
It's a
And
process
then
of
again,
creation. Yeah, it's much higher than you think. It's from the beginning
that's
of
why
creation.
that's something I need to understand a little more. How that separation takes place, why? And then the intaking. I mean, do I take in everything that separates from me, or there is a faculty that chooses what to take in according to the need of the being?
Oh yeah, of course. You have a free will to express yourself as you like, and to discover anything of yourself outside as if it is not you. Now you will know it as yourself, and you will rediscover that what you already know.
Ajnana.
Yes, ajnana is this self-expression. You will go into the world and engage with this the way you find it interesting or needed for your comprehensive, subjective self-expression. You will be looking for the oneness in your own way.
But why does it separate? That's my question.
Because he wanted to see himself objectively. He wanted to know himself in detail. How would he, who alone is, would know himself in detail as a cup, as a hand, as a computer, as the relations between people, and all these qualities of sincerity, humility? How? There is no opportunity for him to manifest them, to know them in those details. This was the creation. He wanted to get there, to
Mhm.
see that infinite variety of all possible relations and meanings in himself. And for that, he separated his action of knowledge from the action of power and perceived that action of power as if different from consciousness.
It's
So we
the
create our own challenges also, therefore.
I
it's
guess
the
so.
adventure of evolution.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we are arriving at that oneness anyhow, because this is the foundation on which we know, yes, the oneness of knowledge and power. Every time we discover something, we already discover something we knew. Can't be
Mhm.
otherwise.
Yes.
Oh, I knew that. You're so great. How do you know that you knew that? Somehow you even know that you knew that.
I was going to say earlier about computers, they seem to be sensitive to our emotions. And I believe this from experiences that I used to have when I was programming CNC machines. If I was having a very, very difficult time doing a certain operation, my computer would reboot itself. And it was because I was feeling such a stress and trouble inside myself, my computer couldn't handle it. It would just stop and reboot. And I've done this many times, so it's very consistent.
Yeah, it's consistent. My computer also knew one. I have this big screen, and sometimes when I switch it on, it doesn't start the screen. So I take it down and reboot through other screen and then come back and then he starts. Now I started to say to him, consciously, press button consciously. And when I press consciously, it always starts the screen. But whenever I'm in a hurry, to press without being aware, boom, nothing. It wants my participation, conscious
Yeah.
participation. Funny, very funny. But I know
But
it's true. Yes?
I was just going to say, I know it's going to take light years of understanding to really get this stuff that you've been
Yeah.
teaching us, but I feel like I've gotten some vague sense of it, that when I walk around, I can sort of, if I think about it or feel into it, that sense of how everything is coming into existence in every moment, from this totality into this manifestation, and how what it means that I only know what I am.
Mhm.
That it's that I am that consciousness manifesting as me and everything else. And just that whole I mean, you've gone through it so many times, I'm not going to reiterate it, but just some vague sense of that feels really rich and magical. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, this is huge to understand.
And it's beautiful and it is doing, it's working. It can be expressed even in the language. Sri Aurobindo did this for us. Incredible expression. Most impossible for anybody to express it.
Mhm.
So we have such a great master who gives us knowledge.
Yes.
We are lucky actually to have Sri Aurobindo,
Mhm.
because
Very
it's not a general kind of statement of experience. It's actually brought down to the mental formulation, and one can, if one wants, by dwelling on it, discover those elements and see how everything is being. So if we become aware of these functionality, he says our functions would change, yes, in the world. Can you imagine we would notice every time in everything those comprehensive, apprehensive movements? They are there. They are always there.
So
I
that
know.
means we were put here for that purpose. Into that ignorance, we were put into that for that purpose, to discover all these
Yes,
beautiful
yes, we
thing.
are arriving at it slowly, but
Mm.
not very, very hastily, because hastily would mean that we will break the manifestation. But slowly, we are becoming more and more aware of their functionality. And once we are fully aware, they will be supramentalized. This is on the supramental level, it is totally obvious. But on the level of the separated mental consciousness, it's just a tool to arrive at some higher perception. Great. All right. Okay. Thank you for today and see you then next time.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.